I never thought I'd have this conversation. 50 years of friendship, and somehow we'd never touched this subject. But there we were, sitting on his back porch in those worn Adirondack chairs we'd occupied 1,000 times before, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of amber and rose, when Tom turned to me and asked the question I'd been avoiding my entire adult life. "James," he said, his voice softer than usual, "why didn't you ever marry?" And just like that, 5 decades of carefully constructed silence hung between us, waiting to be broken. I could have given him the easy answer, the one I'd perfected over the years. Career got in the way, never found the right person, married to my work. Any of those comfortable lies would have satisfied him. Let us go back to our comfortable silence, our beer getting warm in the evening air. But something about that moment, maybe it was the way the light caught the silver in his hair, or the fact that we were both pushing 70 and running out of time for truth, made me decide to finally say what I'd kept locked away since we were boys. "Can I tell you a story?" I asked him. "One I've never told anyone." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something shift in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or preparation. Like some part of him already knew what was coming. "Of course," he said, "we've got nothing but time." So I started at the beginning, the real beginning. Not the sanitized version I'd lived publicly for half a century, but the truth that had shaped every decision I'd made since I was 18 years old. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. I met her the summer before my senior year of college, 1973, at a volunteer program in Appalachia, where we were helping rebuild homes damaged by flooding. She was from Connecticut, studying to be a teacher. With dark, curly hair she kept tied back with a bandana, and eyes that seemed to hold an entire universe of understanding. We became friends immediately, the kind of easy friendship that feels like you've known someone forever, even though you just met. We worked side by side in the July heat, hammering shingles and painting walls, talking about everything under the sun. And I fell in love with her, completely, hopelessly in love. She was brilliant and kind and funny, and when she laughed, it felt like the whole world got brighter. By the end of that summer, we were inseparable. Everyone assumed we were together, and in many ways, we were. Just not in the way they thought, because Sarah had a secret, and she trusted me with it. One night, sitting by the creek that ran behind the worksite, she told me about her girlfriend back home, about how terrified she was of what would happen if anyone found out, about how she'd been accepted to graduate school but was afraid to go, afraid to live her truth, afraid of losing her family, her future, everything. I remember exactly what I felt in that moment. Not disappointment that she didn't love me the way I loved her, but this overwhelming need to protect her, to give her the life she deserved but couldn't have. And that's when I made her a proposition that would define the rest of both our lives. "Marry me," I told her. I was 21 years old and probably the most naive person on the planet, but I meant every word. "Marry me and we'll give each other cover. You can be with who you want to be with. I'll build my career. We'll be each other's shield against a world that isn't ready for us to be ourselves." She laughed at first, thought I was joking, but when she realized I was serious, she cried. We both did, because we both understood what I was offering and what it would cost. A life of pretending, of safety purchased at the price of authenticity. But it was 1973 and the world was a different place. A dangerous place for people like Sarah. We got married that December, a small ceremony with just our families. My mother was overjoyed. My father shook my hand and told me I'd chosen well. "Tom, you were there, remember? You were my best man. You gave that toast about how you'd never seen me happier," and I smiled through it all, playing my part perfectly. And for a while, it worked. Sarah got her teaching position. I went to law school. We bought a small house in the suburbs and hosted dinner parties and did all the things young married couples were supposed to do. To everyone else, we were the perfect pair, best friends who'd fallen in love, living proof that marriage could be built on friendship and respect. But behind closed doors, we lived separate lives. Sarah had her relationships, discreet and careful. I had mine. We protected each other, covered for each other, became experts at the performance of heterosexual marriage. And in many ways, we were happy. We genuinely loved each other, just not in the way the world expected us to. The years passed. We celebrated anniversaries, attended your wedding, Tom, and watched your kids grow up, went to office parties and family reunions and played our roles so well that sometimes I almost forgot it was a performance. Almost. But there were costs. God, there were costs. Every time my mother asked about grandchildren, every time someone made a casual comment about when you know, every time I had to pretend that my life was exactly what it appeared to be, a little piece of me died inside. And I watched the same thing happen to Sarah. Watched her become smaller, more careful, more afraid. The worst part wasn't the lying, it was the loneliness. The profound isolation of living a life that looks full from the outside but feels empty within. Of never being able to be completely honest with anyone except each other. Of watching the world slowly change, become more accepting, and knowing we were too far into our performance to ever step out of it. We stayed married for 32 years. 32 years of friendship and protection and mutual sacrifice. And then, in 2005, Sarah was diagnosed with breast cancer, stage 4. It had already spread by the time they found it. I took care of her through it all. The chemo, the surgeries, the gradual decline. And in those final months, something shifted between us. All the pretense fell away, and we were just two people who'd spent their lives protecting each other, facing the reality that protection had its limits. One afternoon, about a week before she died, Sarah took my hand and said something I'll never forget. "James," she whispered, her voice weak but clear, "promise me you won't waste what's left. Promise me you'll finally live honestly." I promised her, but I didn't keep that promise. I couldn't. By then, I was 60 years old. My entire adult life had been built on a foundation of careful deception. I didn't know how to be anyone other than James the widower, James the successful attorney, James the confirmed bachelor who'd had his one great love and never recovered from losing her. And that story, the story of the devoted husband who never remarried because he could never replace his beloved wife, that became my new armor, my new way of hiding. People thought it was romantic, noble. They'd pat my shoulder and say things like, "That's real love," and "She was lucky to have you," and I'd smile and nod and feel the weight of all those unspoken truths pressing down on my chest. But here's what I couldn't tell them. Here's what I've never told anyone until right now. The reason I never married again, the reason I've spent the last 15 years alone, isn't because I'm being faithful to Sarah's memory. It's because I'm a coward. Because even now, even in a world where people can finally live openly, where the laws have changed and society has evolved, I can't let go of the armor I've worn for so long. I don't know who I am without it. I'm 70 years old, Tom. 70 years old, and I've never been in love. Not the real kind. Not the kind where you wake up next to someone and they know every part of you, the good and the bad and the hidden. I loved Sarah, but it was the love of fellow soldiers in a war we didn't choose. And everyone else, every person I've ever been attracted to, every possibility of real connection, I've kept at a distance because I learned too young how to hide, and I never learned how to stop. Do you know what it's like to reach this age and realize you've never really lived? To look back on 7 decades and see a life that looks full from the outside, but feels like a performance you've been giving for so long. You forgot there was supposed to be something real underneath. I stopped talking then, my throat tight with emotions I'd kept buried for 50 years. The sun had set while I'd been speaking, and the porch was dark except for the soft glow from Tom's kitchen window. I couldn't see his face clearly, and part of me was grateful for that. I'd just unloaded a lifetime of secrets, and I wasn't sure I was ready to see his reaction. The silence stretched between us, and I started to panic. I'd ruined everything. 50 years of friendship, destroyed in one evening because I couldn't keep my mouth shut. I was about to make an excuse to leave, to go back to my empty house and my carefully constructed life, when Tom spoke. I knew, he said quietly. Not all of it, not the details, but I knew you were hiding something. I've known for years. I turned to look at him, shocked. What do you mean? James, we've been friends since we were 12 years old. You think I didn't notice? The way you were with Sarah, the way you've been alone all these years, the careful way you talk about your life, like you're always editing as you go. He paused, and I heard him take a breath. I didn't know the specifics, and I didn't want to push. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready, or not. Either way, you were my friend. And now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Now that you know. Now you're still my friend, he said simply. Nothing's changed except that I understand you better, and I'm honored you trusted me with this. Something broke open in my chest then, something I'd been holding tight for so long I'd forgotten it was there. I felt tears on my face, and I didn't try to hide them. For the first time in my life, I was being completely, utterly myself with someone, and they weren't walking away. I don't know how to be different, I admitted. I don't know how to stop hiding. Then don't, Tom said. Not all at once. You've lived this way for 50 years. You don't have to figure out who you are in one evening, but maybe start small. Start with the truth. Start with the people who love you anyway. We sat there in the darkness for a long time, not speaking, just being. And for the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel heavy with all the things I couldn't say. It felt peaceful, like maybe, finally, I could breathe. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if I'll ever have the courage to live the life Sarah wanted for me, the one she asked me to promise I'd live. I don't know if it's too late for authenticity, if 70 years of armor can be removed without destroying the person underneath. But I know this. Tonight, on Tom's back porch, I told the truth. And the world didn't end. My oldest friend didn't walk away. And maybe that's enough for now. Maybe that's where it starts. One truth, one person, one moment of courage in a lifetime of fear. Tom asked me why I never married. The real answer is complicated and painful, and wrapped up in decades of history and fear and sacrifice. But the simple answer, the one I'm finally ready to acknowledge, is this. I never married because I never let myself be known. And you can't build a life with someone when you're too afraid to show them who you really are. I'm 70 years old, and I'm just learning what it means to be honest. That might be pathetic, or it might be hopeful. I'm not sure yet, but I'm grateful for the question, for the chance to finally answer it, and for the friend who asked it and stayed to hear the truth. The night air was cool against my skin as we finally stood to go inside. My legs were stiff from sitting so long, and I felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. But I also felt lighter, like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long I'd forgotten it was there, and now, finally, I'd set it down. Same time next week? Tom asked as I headed for my car. Yeah, I said, same time. And that was enough. That was everything. Total char count, 12,847.